Hello everyone and welcome to the tournament you've all been waiting for. It's the Altibox Norway Blitz Championship and well, it's a prelude to the main event, which is the Norway Altibox Classical event, and it's a 10-player single round robin where some of the 10 of the strongest players in the world will face off against each other to get better placement in the classical event. So here, depending on what your result will be in the end, it will mainly mean that you will either get 5 whites and 4 blacks in the classical event, or you will have to play 5 times with the black pieces. But there was a lot of argument whether it was maybe better to have more black pieces as then you we're gonna go into this but later, so let's just enjoy this game. It's a very important game as both Carlsen and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave are, I believe, the only 2900 Blitz players in the world, to my knowledge. Maybe Hikaru's up there. Not really sure. I'm gonna have to check that. But not only that, it's a game from the final round, and it will decide the winner of the Blitz event. So without further ado, let's check out the game. And also worth mentioning that the last 2 Blitz games they played, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave won. So Carlsen has a lot to work for in this game. Carlsen opens with e4, and I believe it's the only game in this event that he opened with e4 with c5. The Sicilian and knight to f3 and the d6. And here everyone was waiting to see if Carlsen will actually challenge Maxime Vachier-Lagrave to a Najdorf, as he is known to be the best, I mean the greatest Najdorf expert in the world. But here Carlsen actually went for b4, the wing gambit, and it's not like the Evans gambit. I'm not joking here. He actually did play b4, and it's not like when this pawn is on d6 and the knight is on c6. Sometimes you can actually play this. Like the Mengarini variation Carlsen used against Inar Kiev in the last year's World Blitz Championship, and he won a very nice game in the end. But here it's very rarely played. Maxime immediately captured, c captures on b4, we have d4. So okay, you do have some central control as compensation for your gambited pawn. Knight to f6, bishop to d3, and here there is, well, again, you have to decide how to go about this, but Maxime blitzes out e5, and we have a3, and a3 is a new move here. There actually is one game between two 2500 players where immediately pawn was captured with d captures on e5, but here after a3 it's a completely new game, and it's very nice. I mean, in a Sicilian on move 6 to have a completely new game between world number 1 and world number 2 Blitz players. We have e captures on d4, and now comes knight captures on d4. Now comes b captures on a3. Maxime accepts the other gambited pawn as well. And Carlsen just castles. We have bishop to e7. Maxime now wants to get his king to safety as well. And now bishop captures on a3. We have castles by Maxime, and now knight to c3. So just developing, white is ahead, of course, in development, which is the only compensation you have for the pawn. And Maxime has to, well, develop all of his pieces and then start enjoying his extra pawn. We have knight to c6. Carlsen decides to capture. We have knight captures on c6, b captures on c6, and now f4. Carlsen needs to make something happen as, well, he's still down a pawn. And here Maxime, without any hesitation, goes d5. He offers a series of trades, which will just, reduce material on the board, but he gets to keep his extra pawn. So Carlsen obliges with e5. Now, going for this trade of bishops. Bishop captures on a3, we have rook captures on a3, and now comes queen to b6 with check. Before deciding what to do with the knight, first king to h1, you have to play this, you can block with rook f2, because knight to g4 was a threat, but here knight to g4 nonetheless. And now Maxime is threatening knight to f2 check, which would win the exchange, as you would have to capture with the rook. So queen to e1, guarding the f2 square with both the rook and the queen. And here Maxime has to decide what to do. If, for example, queen to e3 seems like a decent idea, you offer a trade of queens, you reduce more material on the board, but it would actually be a bad move. And it's a really nice tactic to spot, especially as it is a blitz game. But here black actually just blunders the pawn. So feel free to pause the video here and try to take advantage of this seemingly strong queen to e3 move. I'll give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. You are once again an excellent exploiter of mistakes that never actually happened over the board. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, knight captures on d5. This is the point. And now, if you capture the knight, then bishop captures on h7 check, and you lose the queen after rook captures here. So you will not be able to capture the knight. You will have to trade queens now. But after queen captures on e1, you will first get your knight to safety with knight to e7 check. So the king has to move, king h8. Only now you recapture here, and now you've grabbed your pawn back. So although a seemingly strong move, queen to e3, it would actually just lose a pawn here. So Maxime went for queen to c5, now putting pressure on the rook here. We have rook to b3, and now f5. This does create a passed pawn for Carlsen, but also it really blocks this bishop, so no tricks here with queen to h4 are possible anymore, and also it really cements that knight nicely on g4. Carlsen doesn't like that, so he further weakens his king position with h3. The knight now has to go back, but now you have to go knight to e3. Here, it's just better, but here Maxime went knight to h6. He wanted to bring the knight back into the game with something like knight to f7 to d8 to maybe e6 to put pressure on the f4 pawn, but Carlsen now takes great advantage of this. Knight to a4, and now you have to be very careful with the queen. For example, if you play something like queen d4, you get rook b4, and the queen is lost. You don't have any squares left for your queen, so you just have to capture on b4, and the queen would recapture. So after knight a4, you have to go back, queen to e7, and now Carlsen goes queen to c3. Just starts pushing pressure on black's position, and there's really not all that much black can do. It's really hard to develop any pieces. Here we have queen to c7, defending the c6 pawn, and now here Carlsen should have gone rook to a1, but it's a blitz game, impossible to find such a move in a blitz game because it prevents the knight from reaching, from coming back into the game, because Maxime went this knight to f7 in the game that followed, but here if Carlsen went with rook to a1, then knight f7 doesn't work because of knight to b6. This is now the problem, and now your rook is under attack. You have to play something. If rook b8, then just knight captures on d5. You cannot recapture because queen captures queen, so you would have to trade here, but still white just comes out much better in this line. So after queen to c7, we have knight to c5 by Carlsen. And this allows knight to f7, the move Maxime uses to get the knight back into the game. And here e6 by Carlsen pushes the knight further back, but knight to d6 now. We have queen to e5 by Carlsen, and now queen to e7, preventing this pawn from being pushed all the way to e7. And now just rook f to b1, nicely doubling rooks here, and now knight to e4. You don't want to allow any pressure here along this diagonal, so knight to e4 blocking. It's an excellent square for the knight you're threatening to exchange here. There's a double attack here. Also now the queen can capture on c5, so Maxime is forcing a trade here, which will create a passed pawn for himself. With bishop captures on e4, with f captures on e4, and here Carlsen has a very nice move that gives him a lot of initiative. So feel free to pause the video again and try to find the best continuation for white here. It's just a very nice position, so feel free to do so. I'll give you a couple of seconds. As always, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent threatener of mates. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, rook to g3. And now, of course, the knight is off limits due to queen captures on g7 checkmate, and there really isn't a good move black can make. You can develop the rook, both queen and the rook are guarding the b8 square. You can go here, the knight and the rook are covering that square, the knight is covering h6, so you can develop the bishop. You can go here, you can go here. Really, no good moves to make. You would have to make some silly moves like h6, but then comes c4, f5, and it's just a terrible position for black. Here, Carlsen missed the very strong rook to g3. He played rook to b8, which it is a lot of activity for the rook, but it just allows black to trade this rook, which wasn't able to enter the game anyway. We have rook captures on b8, rook captures on b8, and now again, you cannot capture here. If you capture, it's a very nice line, just e7 wins the game. After the rook moves, rook captures on c8. Rook captures, e8 queen, captures, and it's all over. Not in that particular order, but after this rook captures on c8, you would get first queen to e6 check, I missed queen to f8 here, but queen to e6 check, and now it's all over. Now you have to go king h8, and now queen captures here, that's all over. So after rook captures on b8, we have rook to e8 by Maxime. just keeping everything in order, putting again pressure on this e6 pawn. And here Carlsen has to go knight to d7. It's just the only good move for him. He has to play it because here again black doesn't have a move here. You don't really have any active ideas here. You would have to go for something like bishop captures on d7 if you want to do something, but other than that there's just not much to do. But if bishop captures, then again e captures on d7 just wins, and there's not much to do. If you go here, you lose the queen. If you capture here, you just go rook captures on e8 with check. Pick up, you will either pick up the queen, or if queen captures, this will again be checkmate. But here after rook to e8, Carlsen did not go for this. Carlsen instead played f5. He wastes no time, he just goes after the black king. But here it's actually a losing blunder for Magnus. So again, feel free to pause the video and now try to find the winning move for Maxime in this position. It's well, it could be obvious, but you know, it's never obvious when you're playing against the world champion. So again, feel free to have a few seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. I mean, the knight is hanging there on c5, so if you found queen captures on c5, you are an excellent player. And here, there's no compensation. Magnus just blundered the knight. So he tried to create some compensation, queen to c7, attacking the bishop twice, hoping for rook captures here, but now queen just goes back, queen to f8, the bishop is nicely protected, and now Carlsen will eliminate all of these pawns, but still it's no compensation. And here, lastly, the quickest way to victory, Maxime finds it, bishop to d7, just force a trade, and now if you capture here, then you lose the rook here. There's no way you can do this. Magnus played queen captures, but now we get rook captures on b8, and now e7 by Carlsen. We have queen to e8, now comes queen captures on d5 with check, king to h8, and now queen to e5, putting pressure on the rook here. But again, Maxime just goes for the optimal idea, rook to b6. The idea is rook to f6, to f7, and then pick up this pawn. He immediately finds the best way to eliminate Carlsen's only advantage, the e7 pawn. Not advantage, but the only compensation. Here, Carlsen played queen captures on e4, and after rook to f6, Magnus Carlsen resigned the game. Yeah, or maybe his time just ran out, but still doesn't really matter as the position is completely lost. Like we mentioned, whatever white plays, you can start pushing your past c-pawn, you will get rook to f7, and then rook captures here will just be sufficient for a nice win. So yeah, a third win in a row in a blitz game between these two, number 1 and number 2 in the world, Magnus Carlsen and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. And here, for those of you who are not interested in the standings, or maybe you want to, you know, check out a few more games before you see the standings, maybe skip the video, let's say a minute, or even stop watching here. But for those of you who also want to enjoy the standings, here they are. These are the standings. Well, these are the standings. As you can see, after 9 very exhausting rounds, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave comes up on top, a point and a half ahead of Magnus Carlsen and Levon Aronian, which is you know, an incredible achievement. And he now regains his number 1, well, not regains, but overtakes Magnus as number 1 Blitz player in the world. I believe the in live ratings, that's over 30 points of rating in Blitz, so quite an achievement. But there you have it. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Levon Aronian, Magnus Carlsen, Shahriar Mamedov, Ding Liren, Yu Yang-Yi, Wesley So, Fabiano Caruana, Vishwanathan Anand, and in last place, Alexander Grishuk. So there you have it. And like I mentioned, it is somewhat, well, not somewhat, it is quite important for the how you will play the classical event tomorrow, that starts tomorrow. Will you have 5 whites and 4 blacks, or 5 blacks and 4 whites, which is, you know, really crazy. And it is really an interesting event because here there are no draws. If players draw a game in the classical event, then they immediately go into Armageddon having the same pieces. So if Carlsen would play against MVL and they draw their game, then Carlsen keeps, for example, if he had the white pieces, he will keep the white pieces, and then they will go into Armageddon. Carlsen gets, I believe, 7 minutes. MVL would get 10 minutes, which is, you know, a new format, I believe, and then Carlsen has to win with the white pieces, or he loses the matchup. Really an interesting approach. I don't know if how, you know, it will affect the games or anything, but I'm sure that if there will be some games that will be drawn and then there will be an Armageddon, then we might actually show in the video where I will be covering those games, both the classical and the Armageddon game, which, you know, could get somewhat crazy. But yeah, just wanted to put that out there. So I do hope you enjoyed it. Magnus sure didn't, but it's very impressive how he managed to get a winning position with that b4 against the d6 Sicilian. Really just amazing play by both of them, and the result is this beautiful game where Carlsen, unfortunately for him, in the end blundered the knight on c5. But you know, it happens, as you know, things do happen in chess. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Anthony Cox, Nathaniel Pomeroy, Roger Stevens, PCW Sneaks, and Piotr Terzak for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Altibox Norway Championship tomorrow, starting with the classical event. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and if you have any other games that you've enjoyed from the Blitz section, do use hashtag suggestions to suggest them, as I will probably show a few more tomorrow morning. So yeah, thank you all. I will see you soon. Have an excellent rest of your day.